stand by while NCLA cuts through the noise to signal abuse of administrative power. This is Administrative Static with Mark Chenoweth and John Vecchione.
Welcome to Administrative Static. I'm John Vecchione. I'm joined by Mark Chenoweth, and we have a brand new case that we filed at NCLA this week, and it's captioned Fredricks versus the Council of the Inspectors General of Integrity and Efficiency, which is CIGIE.
That's a mouthful.
It is. And this is a very interesting case.
Which is appropriate because there's a lot to chew on here.
There is a lot to chew on. And it's a very interesting case. And the plaintiffs in this case, one of them is an inspector general. And these are the folks who are tasked in each agency with making sure that the law is being followed and rules are being followed and no one's taken from the tail or various other they're sort of watchdogs of the federal agencies. And I.G. Kafari is a politically appointed, Senate confirmed with no opposition, IG. And the other plaintiffs, Kristen Fredricks is a civil servant, senior executive service, has been her whole career in the federal government. And Jim Reed is also same, just a regular employee of the federal government, senior executive service. And Joe Gangloff isn't even he was a federal employee for a very long time. He left. I think he's helping with Ukrainian corruption and things like that. He's retired. And this the Integrity Committee, as it's called, misnamed, as I think it'll turn out, has been harassing these people for 3 years. And you ask, well, what do you mean harassing? Well, the IC was set up to sort of
so 3 years. So these are appointees of the last administration.
Only one of them is. All of the rest. So Joe Kafari was appointed by President Trump, confirmed by the Senate.
The others were career
civil servants. They didn't know Joe Kafari before they went into this suit, into this agency. So what happened here is kind of shocking. And we have what's called the Wilmer Hale report attached to this complaint. But here's what happened, which is
my old firm.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, in any event,
a long time ago.
In any event, what happened here is that I.G. Kafari is appointed to be the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security. And he gets there, and there's all kinds of craziness going on. There is an employee there who is an acting IG, and it turns out that that position had been obtained through shenanigans, basically. And there's all kinds of expenditures. The place is over budget, and there's all kinds of expenditures. And he's like, "What's going on here?" So he had promised the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans were a little upset with the IG, with Homeland Security, things at the border, all that kind of stuff. And the senators made the inquiries they're supposed to make when they're confirming someone, and they asked them tough questions. And he says, "I'm going to go take care of these various problems. I'm going to get to the bottom of it." And as he gets to the bottom of it, he's being stymied by these longtime employees who I think wanted to be the IG, and some of them had even used government funds to oppose his nomination. And so Kristen Fredricks joins from another agency, Social Security, I'm pretty sure, not anything political. And Jim Reed joins he's a legal advisor there. And they start putting the IG's office back in order. But they have to investigate these employees. So they go to the Integrity Committee and they say, "Look, it looks like this person became acting IG in a way that's not how you're supposed to do it, and
not copacetic."
Yes, and has been hiring people when we're over budget, and I have to address these problems. I can't have all these people hired on. So the Integrity Committee doesn't do anything. says it won't look at it. Now, there are a lot of conflict rules in the federal government. If there can be an appearance of impropriety, you can't. It's not like if I'm in a company and I can just fire people or investigate them or do anything. They have rules that if it could be looked like a conflict, you go and get someone outside to take a look at it from another agency. And so that's what the Integrity Committee was for. You go to them and they find somebody from the another IGs to take a look at these problems and make a report. Well, they wouldn't do that. So Inspector General Kafari got a very respected law firm here. He put it out for bid. Wilmer Hale got it, and a very respected attorney in town was helming it. And they looked into this, and they found that the IG's office had basically become a fief, a feudal fief of non-appointed people, and they had used it to accumulate power. So, okay, that's been fixed. He fixes all these problems, so they give him a pat on the back, right? And he's off on his merry way down to the border to check on DHS, making sure they're not locking up children improperly and stuff like that.
I'm going to guess that's not the happy ending.
That's not the happy ending. Within 19 days of him doing this, of getting aboard, he gets a complaint from the IC. Now they're willing to inspect things. So this Wilmer Hale report, they say, oh, is this retaliation? And this is just one. So as we lay out in the complaint, what now happens is that the Integrity Committee, for reasons unknown, but we can suspect perhaps people who are upset with him have been putting in complaints, but they've also been putting in complaints against Kristen Fredricks and against Jim Reed. Unrelated to this, I think, I don't know, Joe Gangloff gets he's being investigated and he's not even there anymore. And so how do they even have any control over him? He's not a non-government person. Where would they even get the power to do that? So what happened then is that endlessly they sent him, they sent to Kafari and to Kristen and to Jim, a series of requests for information and investigation. So what happens is they get a complaint and they send it to him and they ask him, it's about two things, I'll put those aside. Two things are from his confirmation file. They say that he, something about what his credentials were, but the Senate looked into that itself and so did everybody else. And then also there was another before his appointment they wanted to know about, but then all the rest. And right now there are 63 different inquiries, all right? You get a complaint and they have like 5 or 7, there's 63. He has had more than 1.25 inquiries every month since he's been there. And you would think, well, these were all, it's stuff like they don't like the way he edited a memo to the Senate, that they're looking into that. And you would think that the IG gets to edit the memos to the Senate himself without the standard's supposed to be gross negligence at least. And I think it's kind of hard to edit a memo to the Senate with gross negligence, although Mark would disagree with me as he's...
No, I was just going to say, I've done a lot of editing in my day. No one's ever accused me of gross negligence when it comes to editing.
Yeah, but in any event, so...
lots of complaints, but not gross negligence.
So this is going on, and it's nonstop. And come to find out, even though they have rules and standards, that the IC, the Integrity Committee, when it investigates you, says that it's up to you to refute the allegations beyond a reasonable doubt so that no one else could think that any of them were true. That's the standard they go by, which anyone who's been listening to this program or has even a basic understanding of how the law works is not what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to have to show something before they do anything to you. And so, again, you'd think, well, let's take this editing of this report. They don't like, well, let me go get my second in command who handed it over to me and let's go see what we did and how the thing came in. No. The Integrity Committee says this is all in your personal capacity. So how, in God's name, you would edit a confidential memo to the Senate in your personal capacity Senate doesn't want to see your memos in your personal capacity. So, but the IC says that it's in your personal capacity. So that means you have to hire your own lawyer, you have to do your own investigation, and you don't have access to either your subordinates or anybody in order to do all this.
Right. You don't have access to the attorneys in your office who might otherwise be able to help you with
right.
this.
And that's another thing. In all of the federal agencies, if you're accused of some problem, and none of these are criminal matters we're discussing, because the Department of Justice takes a look at it, and the special counsel, and they make those type of decisions. So this is all sub-criminal. It's like I said, gross negligence, that sort of thing. But usually, even if it's if someone's looking into the DHS, if Justice is looking into it, and they get an allegation, the head legal guy at DHS looks at it and says, do we have a conflict with the employee? And if they don't have a conflict with the employee, they say, well, we have an interest in this because DHS did this and we want to be able to show why we did it and that it was on the up and up. And so we would like to put in a laboring oar. But the Integrity Committee says, no, you cannot do that. And that causes a huge problem because not only is the individual doing what is really a public act in defending the actions that were taken without any help, but also the agency itself doesn't get to say why this was necessary or why this was legal. So this has caused a huge amount of problems, and then 63 different inquiries and 37 to the others, to Reed and Fredricks. I mean, that's over 100. I mean, it's inundated. And when we come back, we'll talk about some of the problems, but we'll also talk about the structure of CIGIE and the IC that kind of lead to these problems of nobody being able to stop or take a breath or oversee what's going on here. So in the next segment, we will talk about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Administrative Statics, and we're talking about Fredricks versus CIGIE, a newly filed case by NCLA. So why did we get involved in this? Well, we got involved in this because although there may be other motives behind all this, who knows? We'll find out. We'll get discovery and we'll find out when this case goes forward about what's instigating all this. But it's the structure of the Integrity Committee and CIGIE to some extent that is driving this, because there's nobody in charge to make a judgment of how many resources are being taken up. One of the things in this complaint is that the resources of the IG's office at DHS have been taken up with this endless stream of, and I should quote, although there's something like 63 different inquiries, half of them have already been determined, nothing was wrong.
They're not all pending.
Right, yeah. Right, exactly. They've been closed. And you say, well, okay, how did that cause any harm? Well, number one, it caused harm that these people all had to defend it in their personal capacity, which is, it's a falsehood, right? If you're the Integrity Committee and you tell people that whatever they did in their job was in their personal capacity, that's a falsehood. That is not integrity. That is just simply not integrity to say that. It is completely and utterly false. The very start of every one of these inquiries is false, because it isn't in anyone's personal capacity. They're doing this. They wouldn't even be able to do this in their personal capacity. John Vecchione can't go out and send memos to the Senate or move people around in their jobs or do any of that, right? You can only do that once you have political power or administrative power, as we call it, in the agencies. So each of these investigations begins with a blatant lie by the Integrity Committee. And I think that is one problem. It's a due process problem, really, because they've denied you what every other federal employee gets under the rules, which is, hey, if your agency doesn't have a conflict with whatever the allegation is, they step in. And we see that all the time. I mean, who represents all the people we sue? The Justice Department, right? Or the internal SEC lawyers or whatever. Now, we usually sue them in their official capacity, but even the times when it's the personal capacity, the agency makes a judgment and they decide whether or not there's really any conflict there. So they're denying them that type of due process. But the other thing is that the IC has nobody who makes the judgment, well, gee, we're going to take up 2,000 hours of the time of the OIG, of the IG's office at DHS or at Social Security or at Transportation or any agency. Because really, this suit is for everybody. Every agency is equally hurt by this, unless there's some side of kind of focus, as there seems to be here. But they don't make any allowance for your budget or the things that are on your plate, like going down to the border and making sure that DHS is operating correctly down there, which I think a lot of people would confirm is a big concern. And I certainly think many members of the House and the Senate think that. And so you think of all the inquiries that should have been not made just because of their own standards. If what they're looking for is supposedly gross negligence or something like that. But if an allegation is such that you couldn't possibly, it's within your discretion, they shouldn't have been wasting their time. But there's nobody in charge there. CIGIE's, the head of CIGIE's, whoever it is, there's been 3 different ones of them have testified to Congress that they don't do anything to control the IC. They stay completely out of it. So when the Integrity Committee starts doing something, they appoint someone to do the investigation, either another IG from Transportation or some other some other agency. And who's on the IC? Well, this is very interesting. The inspectors general, some of them are presidentially appointed, Senate approved, like IG Kafari, but some of them right now, the IG of Amtrak's there. IG of Amtrak, it's a public corporation, sort of a hybrid. He's put there by the board of Amtrak. And then you have also PBS. PBS is the employees of PBS aren't even government employees.
Right, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Yes. They're the IG of public broadcasting, they're not presidentially appointed. And even in their IC role, when they're put on the IC, that position, they can't be removed by the president or any officer. No one can remove them. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. Only they can do it. So the structure there means that nobody's in charge of watching the watchers, if you will. And so that, as we know from the Supreme Court decisions that have certainly been coming down in the last 10 years, I think they're older than that, but certainly there's been a lot more focus lately by the Supreme Court that, look, somebody's got to be in charge and they have to be in charge in a constitutional way. And I believe that these Integrity Committee problems are, motives aside that might be political or personal or some sort of administrative infighting, is because of the structure, because no rational structure would be having a series of complaints that are not. Now, let's take a look here. We know that Justice Department has to look at them first, make sure there's nothing criminal. We know that some of this, the special counsel who can investigate many of these things, particularly for employee reasons. And we know that some of it goes to the employee relations agency in the federal government. So all these people have looked at these things and said no.
Well, I was going to say there's one more important thing we know, which is that they've looked at about half of the complaints that have been filed even here, and they haven't found anything in the ones that they've looked at.
Correct. And the thing, and let's take a look at that. So the day before we filed, the day the complaint was filed, each of these people got another inquiry with another complaint with another 7 or 8 inquiries. About records, and so IG Kafari got them, Reed got them, and Fredricks got them. So it's never ending. It's that as soon as you get into office, you're going to be investigated if they don't like you, and there's no one you can go to Who can these people go to? They can only go to the court because there's no structure for saying, hey, wait a second here. How much of this office's resources are going to be taken on this question, and how important is it?
Well, and the other piece of this you were telling me about, John, is that the way this thing is paid for, that they're all contributing money into a pool that Congress isn't involved with. Right,
and I will. One of the complaints I believe it's pretty amazing was that they asked the IG of Homeland Security on January 6th. There was the Secret Service text messages or something had been deleted. Well, the IG of Homeland Security has no control over that. None. He does not control the text messages, and they're asking him where the text messages went. He's like, that's a complaint. When you get it, just from the structure of the government that can't be his fault.
Well, it's something he could have looked into, but he couldn't control it.
Right. In other words, exactly. He could not have directed their destruction or any of that stuff or where they. But
he's not in the chain of command.
Correct. So you see all this stuff, and here's how it's funded. So the way it's set up for the Integrity Committee and CIGIE to do this is that they take a vote of CIGIE that some percentage of every IG's budget. So Congress budgets for IG, and they have an amount for every IG's office. And then CIGIE says, well, for our purposes, we're going to take 2 or 3% of that from every IG. And then we're going to use that for things like the IC. And there's other problems because one of the budgetary executive agents can cut off the money. There is a problem with that because the executive shouldn't be able to cut off shall spend directions from Congress, and in this structure he can. But the bigger problem is that part of your budget has been taken away from you, and then the IC uses
even if you vote against it.
Even if you vote against it. And then the IC then takes up more of your budget and resources by investigating you without any regard.
With your own money.
And without any regard to how much, even in discovery, even in civil discovery, we have the federal rules. And the federal rules say to the judge, hey, yes, very broad discovery, but, you've got to take into account the costs and the resources on, how much.
And are you turning anything up?
Right. How likely are you to turn it up with how much work and digging and volume? Really here it's volume.
Right. You can't boil the ocean for every case.
Correct. And so, but they don't seem to have any care about that. And the other thing
they're a bunch of ocean boilers.
They are not only ocean boilers, but here's the other thing. They say, the IC says, with its PBS-IC people and no security clearance and all this, that they're entitled to every privileged document. That means when the IC gives privileged communications to Congress, that they get to see it. That when they have internal privileged information, that the IC gets to see it. We have special rules that allow the IG, each IG of each agency, Transportation IG, he gets to see the privileged documents of transportation. Homeland Security, he gets to see those. Sometimes they share it amongst them in a joint investigation, but that doesn't mean that the IC, which has no statutory power, gets to blow through every kind of privilege.
Like a super IG.
Like a super IG when there's no statutory warrant for it. So I think that these have been very brave plaintiffs. They're doing this so that they can do their jobs. The last thing I want to just say is Jim Reed, he's a lawyer and he wants to defend his client, which is the IG's Homeland Security. It's not GAFAR, it's not anyone else. And he feels that professional obligation has been interfered with. And that's another problem. And so all of these problems come from the structure and the fact that there is no one to go to say, hey, what are we doing here? Let's look at this picture. And are you allowed to do it? And have you exceeded your powers? So that's why we're in court. That is what the court gets to do so that we don't have an agency uncontrolled and kind of rogue interfering with important work that Congress has assigned, the presidentially appointed and Senate approved agent of the government. And we'll be back in a bit.